So here is the early struggles that we probably could have seen coming a little bit. How many times with a quote unquote super team do we have to get reminded that it takes a minute? But as we sit here talking today, they have got the 29th defensive rating in the NBA, 119 points allowed per game. Just a shade, by the way, speaking of shade, a shade above Fred Katz's Pacers, 119.3 at 30th, and just above the Wizards. This is not good company to be keeping on the defensive end of the floor, where the Mike Budenholzer Bucks, buttered their bread back in the Drew Holiday days. 24th in net rating, minus 6.6. You're talking about close wins over Philly, Miami, bad losses to Atlanta and Toronto in those two games, giving up 127 to the Hawks, 130 to the Raptors. By the way, the offensively anemic Raptors, who have just been dying on that end of the floor, giving you 130. Chris Middleton, just to give a little more context, coming off that knee surgery in the summer, only playing 17 minutes per game and has only played 3 to 4 games. Dame has been on a roller coaster ride with his performance. Had some great moments and then had a couple bad nights. What are we seeing there? And more kind of broadly speaking, what do we think about the East? Because we had Milwaukee and Boston. Boston's killing. We'll get to them in a minute. That Mr. Holiday is doing his thing out there. But what are you seeing out of the Bucks so far?
Well, I think you spoke it up. I mean, last year they were top 5 in defensive rating. Last year, I think they were like 4th. And Adrian Griffin, who is a critical element of this puzzle, right? We focus so much on Dame and on Giannis, and even to a lesser extent on Chris Middleton because he hasn't been healthy, because he looks like the missing piece on the floor, that we don't even talk about the adjustments that comes in when you're bringing in a first-year head coach to a championship level team, and then you throw in Damian Lillard, who is the antithesis of Drew Holiday defensively. Like, Drew Holiday could cover up a lot of ills with point of attack defense and being able to get into the passing lanes. He has a lot of length that can sort of cover up and play to the way that Bud Ball liked to play. Like, they weren't aggressive last year, but you had a wild card in Drew that could get into the passing lanes, make things a little more difficult. Now you've got Dame, who's not defensively inclined, and Adrian Griffin is saying we're going to be more physical, we're going to be more aggressive, and that takes time to change a defensive identity that's been largely successful because of the playoff failures. Mind you, they won a championship, but because of the playoff failures, you got to go a different direction. And usually when you break up with one girlfriend, the next girlfriend is the total opposite, right? You don't know about that life, Sam, but I'm just telling you, as a single man, that is usually how it has gone. And I have been the boyfriend that's been the total opposite of the last boyfriend.
So you're basically like the GM who, you hear this from coaching agents that like you just hit on, like every team ends up going the opposite direction. So Vinny, the GM of his love life, has
What
lived
love
this
life?
a little bit.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, what love life? No, it's like that head coaching chair is vacant. You know what I mean? Like it's like Terry Stotts. He just quit. but and don't discount that part as well. Not that Terry Stotts was some great defensive mind, but the experience of someone who has been a head coach for nearly 10 years. You didn't replace him. That's like very jarring for a team.
Sure.
Then you add in Chris Middleton. Then you got Dame dying on screens. Then you get Giannis, and we got to ask our questions here. How do I put this? Usually MVP players win them in clusters, with the exception of Michael Jordan, who's an alien of all aliens. But Larry Bird won his 3 MVPs in a row. Magic Johnson won 3 in 4 years. Steph won 2 in a row. LeBron won 4 in 5 years. Usually it happens in a very concentrated period of time in the modern NBA. I probably named damn near 20 MVPs of those 4 or 5 guys in the last 35 years. Giannis's height of 19 and 20, and then he became a champion, a year later. Can Giannis reach that high on being an MVP player on offense, an MVP player on defense? Can we expect him to be that? Because I feel like Giannis covered a lot of ills with the Milwaukee Bucks, a lot of structural ills, just because he was so athletic, so great, and oftentimes so random. But if he is 95% of that player, how much worse does that make the Bucks?
Yeah, those are fair questions. It's wild to me that, and I wrote about this, like when this trade went down, they'd been kicking around the idea of Dame for years, but it was not happening. They were not pursuing it until they got word from Dame's camp that he would be happy and comfortable coming that way. So then they kick it into high gear, and then they spend the better part of 2 weeks looking at this thing from every angle. Obviously, a big part of that is the Bucks studying their own defense, studying their own defensive history, studying the questions that you are now raising. They, they stating the obvious. They got to a conclusion that Damian Lillard makes us better, and that the offensive benefits that come with him, that they supersede the defensive weaknesses that might come, because he's no Drew Holiday, and that's not a knock. There's Drew is one of one. But again, early returns might take a while. Eventually, maybe they get it there. But this is even uglier than I think we could have expected.
I think the defense that you guys brought up, Vinny, you talked about Adrian being an opposite of what Bud was doing, being more physical, being more aggressive. And it's funny, the Bucks, I feel like, are actually executing that part of what they wanted to accomplish. They are forcing a whole lot more turnovers. They're not killing themselves with fouls. But the fact that a Toronto Raptors team that couldn't score on the Blazers, right, was able to score as easily as they did. The Raptors had 35 assists last night. And you know what? The Raptors still turned the ball over a lot. They had 18 turnovers, to the point. The concern that I have with the Bucks, Brook Lopez was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate last year, even at the stage of career that he was in. And it's because he was put in position by the defense that the Bucks employed, a contained heavy defense. The Bucks were dead last in trying to force turnovers last year, but they did everything else well. And they parked Brook at a point where it's like you're not scoring over him, and you have Giannis as that rotating four, that elite help defender. I think the Bucks are all over the place. They are still big, so they're rebounding decent enough. They're forcing more turnovers. They're not killing themselves on fouls. The Toronto Raptors defensive last year, that Adrian Griffin was on that staff, they would do the same things, but they were smaller and they bled threes. And eventually they got to the point where it's like, me, Jakob Poeltl. And Jakob Poeltl didn't even help them. Brook is all over the place. His rim protection was elite last year. To begin this year, the Bucks are the worst rim protecting team in the NBA. That is a concern, because the only solution is to either adjust to your player or to change the players. And you just gave Brook the bag and signed his twin to be on the team. I don't know if you changing players, man. Like Chris Middleton, I don't know if you're changing players, and it doesn't look like we're getting full strength Chris anytime soon.
No.
Dame is here. Giannis is here. You're starting Malik Beasley, and again, you're paying everybody else. I don't see how they can change the players. So this is going to be very interesting for Adrian Griffin, because we've seen coaches get hired and then a year later teams decide to make a decision. I'm not saying that should be imminent, but that's the biggest test for Adrian Griffin right now. Like, he's accomplishing what he wants to accomplish as a defense as far as a factor, but as far as the overall effectiveness, those players are out of position, and it's the oldest team in the league. If this is an issue now, in November, what's it going to look like when winter starts, the injuries start hitting, the road trips start grinding? The bodies aren't going to be more crisp, come February and March. So that's what I'm looking at. I think the offense will take care of itself. I think there's talent. They're going to win games off of that alone. But what Adrian's trying to do defensively, it's some things, the things he wants is working. But overall, I don't know if it fits the team.